I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello everyone, welcome to Campfire Talk. This is where we sit around the fire, put our feet up with a cold drink, and let the conversation flow. Milo's not with us today. He's got the flu, so he's recovering from that. He's doing okay, but he's just recovering. But we are fortunate to have our good friend, the judge. Tony's with us. So,
hello.
I don't know where we're going to roll with this. I guess, Tony, you got some stories I think we were all interested in hearing.
Well, you might like this. It involves a couple of them and some background. I had a very good friend who was my hunting partner up in Montana. He was also the tow truck driver, and he was the only one for 200 miles or so. And you can imagine he was called on a lot of experiences in a lot of places. And some background, he's an avid hunter. Didn't matter what it was, he hunted it. And his walls had the pelts and the heads to prove it. And a number of years ago, he was up in the mountains. Now, when this gentleman went hunting in the mountains, he was in the mountains. He drove until the road gave way, and then he got out and walked 5 miles and then set up his camp. So he was truly in the middle of nowhere. And so he had gone out, he had his gear, had his gun ready to go, parked his car, and started hiking. Hiked way back to where he liked to hunt, put his tent up, got everything ready, got up the next morning, looked out the tent flap, and there was a Sasquatch. He figured about 50 yards away, walking right through the area. And he looked at it, and it looked at him, and it gave one of those tremendous roars. He grabbed his gun and left. That was 20 years ago, and his gear is still there to the best of his knowledge. He never went back. Nothing scares this man. Nothing. But that was his story. That was enough for him.
I think I would have left more than my gear there.
Yeah, no kidding. So he was also, he was a local tow truck operator, and he got a call late one night. So he jumped in his tow truck. A couple of ladies had locked themselves out of their car. So you have to understand where we were at. All roads out of this town, other than one that went east to west, were dirt. So if you left the main drag, you were on dirt, that's it. And that road continued on for 20 miles, dirt. So he gets his call, he takes off. I think, and I've been back there, scouted the area, it's about 10 miles back. He sees their truck and his headlights, turns off his car, goes walking up. No women. Nobody's there. Car's locked. He doesn't know what to think. This is the middle of freaking nowhere. So he calls out, and he hears a timid, hello, shaky voice. It's coming from underneath their truck, their car. He looks underneath, and there are these 2 women hiding under the car. So he gets them out, tells them everything's fine, asks them what's wrong. They said they had set up a camera to capture a comet. I don't know what comet it was. They all have weirdo names. But they wanted to catch this comet. This was a great place to do it. We were away from city lights, of course, no city lights up here. And they were going to photograph it. And they set up their tripod, their camera, and just as they got ready to watch this thing, a Bigfoot walks out of the scrub, walks right past them, didn't look at them, didn't care, kept on walking right through their camp, through the sea. And they ran to their car, but because they were in the middle of nowhere, what's the use of taking your car keys, right? Who's going to steal your car? But they locked the door. So they had locked themselves out of their car in the middle of nowhere with a huge creature walking right through their photo scene, and they were petrified. They could barely talk. So he got their keys for them, got them into the truck, and off they went. He followed them out. But when they got into town, which wasn't much of a town, he said they could barely talk. They were absolutely beside themselves. So they grabbed their coffee, they got in their car, and they left. And he barely got them calmed down enough to take their camera with them. But that was his second Sasquatch story. And it was a good one.
Well, gee, I wonder what was bothering him so bad.
I don't know. It must have been seeing things. He surely didn't listen to this show.
See, that's the problem. Everybody needs to listen to the shows that we put out so they'll not be in a spot
That's
where,
right.
They're like that.
We're told is four-armed or however that goes. But, yeah, that's what happened. I have another. When I lived there, I've had a little bit of difficulty health-wise, and so I had to move, unfortunately. But I had a neighbor not more than a mile from me. And he called one day, and we've been talking about this, and he said, the big guy's here. Why don't you come over? And I knew exactly what he meant. And then I hear some commotion. And he says, just a minute. And his wife got involved. And she did not want a scene. She did not want publicity. She wanted them protected. She wanted it quiet. And so he came back and uninvited me to his campfire, where the big guy was apparently there. I guess he was just observing. I don't think he was participating in the barbecue. But they were there, and they were close. It was a great place. Montana is just a wonderful place for wildlife.
Well, Tony, the town that you lived in, I believe you told me at one point, huge metropolis of 500, maybe 550 people.
Yeah, it was in the summertime. It exploded to about 1,100 people, and in the winter it was only 600 people or so. It was heaven for me. When I drove into town to look at the house and realized that all roads are dirt, I was home. It was just, what a beautiful place. I was always thrilled and really excited to hear some of the people who have come on this show and others who talk about living in Montana and having many encounters. In fact, encounters that go back generations with Bigfoot. So they're in the area, and there are a lot of them. Kalispell is a big area, all through the Glacier Park area. It is it's quite a haven for Sasquatch.
Well, Tony, the other thing I wanted to know is you have a Bigfoot. You sent me a picture of it. It's not the Bigfoot that we're talking about, but with your permission, I'd like to be able to post it either on this episode, well, if that's okay with you, and it gives you an idea of some of the local fauna that are there. This was 2 blocks from your house, right? That grizzly.
You know, Tom, I do not recall it. I'll tell all the folks I had a stroke that knocked me on my tail for about a year, and although I have not had problems with memory, that photograph doesn't come to mind. But sure, use it. What the heck? As long as I'm fully clothed, you're welcome to use it.
Well, there you go.
Well, no guarantees.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know.
Right. Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll post it on the GRG Facebook page, so everybody can get a look at it there.
I mean, we have here in Oregon, we have black bears, and we get some 400-pounders. But this thing,
Oh, you're
you look
talking
at the
about the
claws.
grizzly picture.
Yeah,
Oh,
the grizzly
yeah.
picture. Yeah.
Oh, he was huge. Yeah, I didn't know exactly. He didn't define it well enough. Yeah, he was. Go ahead, use it. He was absolutely a monster.
I mean, one swipe from that, you're done. You wouldn't even know what hit you.
No, many times in fact, I don't know if this is too personal or not, but when they found me face down in my garden, I was in bad shape. But what got me, why I was found was my neighbors heard the grizzlies going through the garbage. And he went outside to chase away the grizzlies and found the judge face down in the onions. And so it was it was that reason that they found me out there. I'd still be there.
Yeah, or the grizzlies would have taken you away.
Well, yeah, I would have been a light snack.
Well, it's a good thing the neighbors came out there and they were after the garbage first and not the judge.
Yeah, that's right. Although the judge smelled worse than the garbage, I assume it attracted him. Anyway, that's my story.
Well, it's pretty interesting, and there's not a lot of people out there who can say, well, this is one of the occurrences that can happen in my town. We have things to deal with. But
I don't know the name of the movie, but this fella was a guide, and he guided a number of different people, some movie stars. Stallone was one of them. Took him on hunts. But while he was doing that, they asked him to be an extra in a movie. I can't remember the name. But he was supposed to have been sitting in the snow and died in the snow and was frozen in the snow. And he literally had to sit in the snow for hours to shoot this. But if any of your viewers, and I'm certain there'll be a number of them that'll know the movie, if they see the movie, he's the guy that's frozen in the snow. I wish I remembered the name of it, but I don't. So go to your local.
It sounds like an interesting movie, though.
Oh, yeah.
Although sitting in the snow, that doesn't interest me a whole lot, but, for hours on end.
I got a call.
Was that Jeremiah Johnson?
I don't know. I just don't know.
I
got a call from.
I think that might have been the movie. I remember that character sitting in the snow. They found him frozen. He was just sitting there.
That could very well have been him. In fact, I think it was. We were going to go elk hunting one morning, and I got a call. And he said, it was early, before sunrise. And he said, step outside. What? Step outside? You've been outside yet? No. So I stepped outside. 48 below.
Good Lord.
So I went in, had a cup of coffee, and went back to bed. 48 below.
How do you heat your house in that? I mean, that's
Man.
unreal.
I used to carry a lot of wood in. I'd carry 3 or 4 armloads a night, and you're up every couple hours stoking a fire. Gosh, it was great. It was just great.
I know, Forrest.
Well, I got to tell you, my wife's family is sort of from that neck of the woods. They're actually from Canada. They had stories like that.
I hear Forrest's wheels turning there, Tom.
I'm sorry, I got us off topic here, and I didn't.
No, there's no topic.
Nope, no topic.
Y'all forget I spent 17 years in Alaska.
That's true. That's true. Did it bring back fond memories, though?
Oh yeah, yeah. I always laugh when we get snow and ice here in Texas, and everybody goes, "Oh, I can't go to work, and I can't do this, and I can't do that." I mean, it's like that was never an excuse in Alaska, because the first thing you get was, "Are the snow plows running?" Yeah, you can come to work.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure a lot of people know this by now, but in Fairbanks, I know they have electrical outlets that are on the parking meters and around town.
Yeah.
So when you plug your car in, so the engine doesn't freeze. That's standard up there.
Yeah, block heaters. People don't. I had people. I've got one on my vehicles, both my vehicles, and people ask me, "Oh, I didn't know that they made electrical cars like that." And I'm like, "They're not electrical cars. That's a block heater." We had. You go shopping anywhere in Alaska, into the major cities, and I'm sure it is the same way in the smaller towns too. But you go just the parking places, even on the parking lot. Every other one will have poles there with plugs that you can plug your vehicle into.
Wow.
Yeah, it gets that cold. I mean, you've got to have that oil's got to be heated up, or you're not starting your vehicle.
And our friends live in that, if you can imagine it. They live, and of course, sort of grizzlies and moose and everything else, but we're not made for that. That's for sure.
Nope. We're warm weather folks.
We don't have enough hair on our bodies.
You know, one thing you mentioned, Tony, though, when they didn't want to have you come out there where the creatures were at that time, it's kind of, it reminds me of people, you know, most legitimate stories I've heard, you know, where people have some kind of evidence or they have something happening right now, they don't want any kind of attention on it.
No, that's true. That's true.
And for me, that's a real way to gauge these days. You know, if I see somebody posting something all over social media, that's a huge red flag. But if somebody, you know, contacts me, but they don't want to talk, they don't want anything out there in public, to me, that's the most credible.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And you can tell when those people are legit too, because I remember doing shows where they would stutter while they were telling their story and stuff, and to me they were reliving the experiences that they had, and you can tell those people are legit.
Absolutely, you could hear the emotion in their voices.
Yeah,
you sure can.
Yeah,
sure
Chuck,
can.
you're spot on with that. That's one of the things. You know, how do we vet? How do we validate? And a lot of it has to do with the credibility of the person. How do you determine that? And are there repeating patterns? But what you just said, when it brings back those emotions, I think about a lot of the guests. But I think of Gerald up in Washington State. You know, and you can hear the emotion coming back. He kind of got mad at Will. He said, "Well, you're bringing it back, man."
You know, that's the unfortunate part. Is sometimes it does, but it also helps you kind of put it in its place in your mind. You know, the more you talk about it.
Well, you know, demeanor is very, very important to a judge, and if somebody appears in your courtroom and their demeanor is off, something's not right. They just it is part and parcel of your decision. Is the demeanor of your witness, and within the last 10 years, they have gone to hearings that are over the telephone. Never used to have that. I'm showing my age now, but that's the way it is. And to have somebody in the courtroom testifying, and you can see their facial features, you can see how they move, it's extremely important. And the same thing applies here. When people have something to gain, there's a monetary interest, notoriety. It's really easy to see. And I think it's really important.
Well, I know I've seen things, because we watch the ID channel and all these murder cases, and, when they're talking about witnesses in court, the police are, and sometimes the attorneys, they talk about things like, the way a person is, when they're answering a question, they're looking up, I think it's to the left, if I recall, where that's an indicator where they're trying to access memories. So they're walking their own mind through the details of a situation, and that's kind of an indicator that what they're doing. And there's another way, I think, I don't know if it's the opposite way, where they're fabricating things. And but anyway, that's something I always thought was interesting.
I'll tell you a funny story. I had a hearing. I was the arbitrator at the time, and husband and wife were there, and of course all the attorneys, and questions are being asked. Well, the couple that were in front of me, the husband and wife apparently didn't realize, I don't know why, they didn't realize that the table was glass. And so as the wife is testifying, you see the husband's leg hit her leg under the table. And so every time she'd say something that was not true, or he didn't like, or he was worried, he'd kick her under the table with his leg. Boy, I thought that was a great indicator. I just laughed. What a moron. They lost.
Well, in reference to kind of what Will was talking about, people looking off to certain directions as to be whether there's veracity to what they're saying or not. I was actually watching in one of those true crime shows, and I won't say what it was in reference to, but this particular gentleman, he analyzes people's facial expressions and the things that they do while they're testifying and saying things. And they said that I found this quite interesting, and I actually, when I started thinking about it, I thought, you know what? People do this. When they're trying to access memories, that sometimes people will actually close their eyes, and it's actually like they're trying to picture in their mind what actually happened. And they said, now, and what's even more peculiar is that blind people that have never had sight will do the exact same thing. They will close their eyes.
Oh, that's interesting.
That is. I think that was totally interesting. That it's obviously a function that we do as humans to access those recessed memories. And I thought, how interesting. Even blind people do that.
It's interesting, too. I've been out many times with witnesses, take me to the spot where they had their encounter. And they're very meticulous about details, small details. Mm-hmm. And you'll watch them. They'll say, well, I was standing here. And then they'll look around and think, well, no, wait a minute. And it'll maybe make two steps. No, this is it. And they're very particular. Whereas if somebody's fabricating something, they do a lot of generalities. The story might sound good, but it's always in the details. When they're really meticulous about all the things that they saw and heard and where they were and where the creature was, that's really telling.
A lot of times you'll see their body react too. I spoke to a guy just this past week that had an encounter, and he pulled up his shirt sleeves, and there were goosebumps all over his arms. And
What?
a lot of times you'll see that in somebody's reaction, and you just know it's legit because of how their body responded to the story that they were telling.
You can't fabricate that, Chuck.
No.
You really, that's a reaction.
And I'll tell you what, I could relate to it, Chuck. When people, I'll go on a show or something and somebody will have me recount my encounter, my first one. And, even though it's been so many years, it's been since 1974, but the back of my neck will get cold and it feels like the hair's standing up. It's just, you're still reacting to something even after that many years.
Well,
do
you have nightmares about that?
Oh yeah, I still have nightmares.
Yeah,
they're not often, but I still have them.
I do too, but I don't. Yeah, I do too, and I don't tell too many people. I mean, it's like, sometimes you're almost afraid to close your eyes. Like, what am I going to dream about tonight?
Yep, I know I don't have nightmares, but I have uncomfortable dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Will, you talked about, and we both know the gentleman, Lee. We've had him on the show, and he took you back to the place where he saw the creature, and you were telling me that he really had a visceral reaction.
Yeah, I mean, now, Lee's a big guy. He's real type A type personality. He went armed. In fact, he brought two pistols, made me carry one while we were there. And I don't carry firearms, so that was, and before we even started going into the location, and to me it wasn't, it was not far from where his old house was, a couple 100 feet. The main road was there. Now, granted, it wasn't like a super highway or anything. It was just a 2-lane road, kind of out, away from, it wasn't near a town or anything, but it wasn't a place where I would get real excited about, the creatures being right there and an imminent threat or anything. But he was definitely reliving the moment, and it had been at least 5 or 6 years since the encounter. He was chain smoking, and I mean a lot, quickly, and pacing back and forth. It was like he was trying to work himself up actually to walk into the space. And it was an open area. It was timbered, but it was open, not a lot of underbrush. And it was very interesting to watch that behavior as he was trying to work himself up into going 50 feet from the truck to, kind of show me around this place.
Hey, let me tell you something. The story that I told you about my friend who, is a mountain man, let me tell you how I found out about that. We were on this dirt road driving up to this area, just in general, not for any reason. And he stopped me and he said, "Do not drive on the other side of that bridge, old dilapidated bridge." And I said, "Why?" He says, "I'm not going anywhere on the other side of that bridge." And it was because that's where his encounter was. And we're talking 20 years. We're talking a man who lives in the mountains. And he would not drive across that bridge to that area anymore. Never been up there. So it has dramatic effects on people.
It does. I think about some of the areas that I've had the encounters. And as you get closer and closer, it starts to come back. And your head's on a swivel. Yeah, you're inside of a truck and you got people with you. But you remember things, and I get that. It's funny, the last one that was, we didn't see them, but like 2:30 in the morning, Will remembers this. We went to a spot, and it was the last second thing. It wasn't the last minute, it was the last second thing. At 2:30 in the morning, we pulled into this, it was an old power line cut, and we were going to go in and calibrate some equipment and stuff like that. And we got in there, and we weren't there 5 minutes before. All I can say is it was a cacophony of, we were surrounded not really surrounded, but about 180 degrees by something picking up trees that had to have been the diameter of a telephone pole and just smashing them into other trees. And some of these things were like 50 yards in front of us and smashed the side of a piece of equipment, logging equipment, excavator, old logging excavator. That was probably 200 yards away. And going back there in the daytime with a buddy, your head's on a swivel. It's all coming back. And yeah, I get that.
Well, it's just like the incident. I think I related this to you, Tom, and Chuck will know exactly what I'm talking about because he was party to this. When I was having all these strange things happening with the lights coming on and everything else here about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And, I even, I told Will about this too. And I was sitting in bed and the motion light kept coming on. And Chuck kept telling, well, get up and look out the window. And what did I tell you, Chuck? No, I'm not, because I didn't. I'm not going to do it. Because you know what, guys? I was scared to death what I was going to see out there. And, I know I don't act like somebody that's a fearful person, but you know what? I'm not really crazy about looking out my window and having one standing just on the other side of the window again. I mean, me seeing another one maybe 50, 200 yards away, that's fine. But it just doesn't produce the same type of reaction as looking out the window and it's standing right there looking back at you.
Well, what about the guy we just had on the other day? A witness where it was staring at him. And Tony, you'll get a kick out of this. It was he was in his camper. And he had the window, those pop-out windows, and it kind of huffed or breathed on him. He gets all this
he was sleeping.
Saliva on his face.
Yeah, he was sleeping.
Yeah, well, he had propped his head up, and then here's this thing looking at him with the big old eyeballs. And we have other stories that we probably or absolutely cannot talk about with windows. So, yeah, I get it. All you got is a little piece of quarter-inch glass between you and this thing smashing its fist through the window? I don't think so.
Wouldn't you just crap on yourself?
Yeah, if you lived long enough, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
the idea of being pulled through in serrated glass. No, that doesn't thrill me too much either.
We've had Kurt on a few times, and Will, we met up with him and his wife in July. And he and I were up there and we were inspecting this little tiny footprint, a baby, probably 5.5, 6 inches max footprint in the dirt. And all of a sudden off in the distance, and it had to have been, it was hundreds of yards away. You heard this scream. And then from that point, you go about 60 degrees to the right, and you heard an answering scream. And I look at Kurt, I'm kind of mouth, did you hear that? Yes, it was, and it was in the middle of the day, which is odd. Very unnerving. It's like, okay, this is quite unnerving. And we drove off, and we actually ended up recording this thing. There was another one that must have been watching us the whole time. I bet it was 50 yards away. We have no idea where it was. But we had company, and this is another one of those times. Well, most of these encounters we're going to go to where they're not.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is a good spot.
Yeah. Well, it's like Lee. I mean, you see the markings when they're present in an area, they'll mark the place. And you saw, and I mentioned, I said, we were driving across through that area about 30 miles from one place to another. And I told everybody to watch for the markings. If this is common, you'll see it often. But if it's not, you won't. And sometimes it's more important what you don't see than what you do see. And sure enough, we didn't see those markings. Well, Lee, when I was talking about how, very visibly frightened he was at going into that place where these things had happened years before, got even more unnerved when I showed him a marking that was maybe 20 or 30 feet from his previous home. And even though he said during that time they were relatively, I guess they went right up to the house, didn't they, a couple times? You remember, Tom?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
But he didn't realize
Very too
they
close,
were
yeah.
marking that close to the house. And nowhere else, it was just right there next to his home. So there was something that was attracting him to that spot.
And that's what I find interesting is these unexpected, totally out of the ordinary behaviors, which, we've talked about. We're seeing more and more of this lately.
Well, and we've talked about
coming
that.
right up to the house.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Well, yeah, I mean, they are coming up. I mean, I think they have for some time, come up to people's homes. And it could be just that they're just recently more people talking about that, or it could be an increase in activity too.
Yeah. I still go back to Brenda's story. It's scary, but I love it. It's hilarious.
Well, Forrest can relate.
Them, they look at him.
Yeah, Forrest can relate. Yes.
Well, you know what? I think this is a good time for us.
Just put the can of bean outside, and you'll be okay.
That's right. Put it out on the porch.
Well, for our listeners
and make sure you
have
leave the
heard
damn can opener out there too.
That's right.
For us, let's do this. Some of our listeners haven't heard it. I know Tony hasn't heard it. Would you be okay relating it?
Oh God, you guys are going to assure me of having nightmares tonight. So you want to hear the can of beans story? Okay. Oh God. Well, I always use the term that I came to. And that's exactly what I think happened. I actually came to because I think I was actually knocked out. It wasn't just like I woke up. But irregardless, I was living in my cabin at the time because my house had burned down. And so this is a 20 by 16 building and a cabin. With an upper and lower area, and I was sleeping in the lower area, and of course the kitchen and the living quarters is all combined. So anyway, just to give you a visual, and I don't know if I'd ever ever said that before, but anyway, I think you probably gathered that when I told the story. So I come to, and my head is hurting, and I had placed my hand up on my head. And I have a pole light off to the northwest of the building. So there's ambient light coming in the building all the time from this pole light. And from that window on that side of the building. And I looked at my hand, and it had black all over it. And, of course, in the dark, I'm not really seeing colors. And that's when I reached over and I had turned on the light. Now, I guess I need to do a sidebar here because I used to go to sleep. I don't do it anymore with my earbuds in, listening to programs such as Creek Devil and other things. And so this obviously had affected my hearing of what had transpired that night or early morning. So I turned the light on and I looked at my hand and I'm like, there's blood all over my hand. And of course, when I first put my hand up, the reason I put my hand up, when I sat up, the blood had started running down my face. So I actually had felt it. And that was the reason I put my hand up to my head, aside from the fact that it was hurting as well. I had a good goose egg on the front of my forehead, and I bear a scar in the middle of my forehead to this day from that. And I had this blood on my hand, and I'm like, okay, what the heck? So I'm like grabbing Kleenexes and, wiping it off my head. And that's when I realized, when I sat up, there was a can of beans that had rolled down my pillow. And you know what? I think I told you, it didn't even register on me that that's what I had gotten hit with. I just sat it up on the nightstand there, and that's where it sat until the next morning when I saw it, and there was blood on the can. So while I'm sitting there and I look across the room at my door, and I should add there too that at that point in time, none of my cats were around. They were all upstairs peering down at me. And there was a peculiar smell in the cabin. And I remember, Tom, you asked me about this because I said it smelled like real strong urine. And you jokingly asked me had I changed my cat box. And it didn't smell like cat urine, trust me. And it was just a musky, kind of a real strong urine smell. Well, anyway, while as I'm swing my legs over and I'm sitting on the edge of the bed and I look up, I see that my door is open to the cabin. Now, I was very particular about locking, because I live out here on this ranch by myself, and I am very particular about, locking my doors, and I had a deadbolt on it and everything. And I think it was at that point in time, this was a couple of months after the incident with the window. And I think it just kind of hit me all at once. Like, oh my God, no, it surely not. And the door, I couldn't get it to close. In fact, I think I told you guys, I ended up having to replace the lock and the deadbolt on it, because what had happened was the door had actually been moved kind of askance in the frame, and they had just pushed the door in. A human could, I guess they could have, but I think they would have had to done it with a leg. And, like the police do, you see them all, kicking the doors in. Maybe they could have done that. You would have thought that would have woke me up. But I think this thing just slowly, this is my own idea, and I have pondered on this a lot. I think it just pushed it in because the whole frame where the deadbolt fits in there, it was just gouged out. The whole hole was just gouged out of the door frame. So it had just been pushed in. And here was this door standing wide open. As I told y'all later, I was grabbing everything I could find to push in front of the door and close it up. And, I didn't want somebody or something coming back in there. And that's when I realized that, I didn't put two and two together until the next morning. I saw the blood on the can of beans. That's what I got hit with.
Beaned with beans.
And beans. And it had picked up this can of beans right there off of the counter in the kitchen, and it was a full can of Bush's beans. And I'm not trying to do advertising for Bush's beans, but that's what it was. So, and I have never forgotten that. I had to have somebody come out and completely put new locks and deadbolts on the door. And y'all asked me, you thought, did I think it was I don't think it was the big guy that I saw, at that window. He was way too big. I don't think he could have gotten that door. I think it was a younger one. And,
well, you've had tracks of younger ones there.
Oh, yeah. And the thing about it is that, you hear about him chunking rocks at people and stuff. I don't know that it was necessary. I think it was mad. Hell, I don't know. I'm not a Bigfoot mind reader, so I don't know what was going through the thing's mind.
Here's a possibility
Obviously,
too.
It didn't rip me from limb to limb. Either.
Here's a possibility too. Instead of throwing it, maybe it was just holding it up, looking at it above you, and dropped it.
Well, that is a possibility, because obviously I was sleeping and I don't know what transpired. But you hear about them chunking rocks at people and stuff like that. So it might have been just handing out.
Well, it was handing it to you.
And those cans
get up.
Those cans are heavy enough. I mean, it could have knocked you out.
Let me ask a question. This is fascinating. First, I've heard it. What was the distance? Where was the can of beans normally kept? In the cupboard, on the sink, where?
No, I had that particular can of beans I had left sitting on the counter there. And
right.
I did have a cabinet there too, but I don't recall now. I mean, this has been several years ago, but
so
whether
it
the cabinet
was on
opened up. But It must have been sitting on the counter that I'd left it out for some reason.
What would have been the distance between the counter where the beans were located and you?
About probably 6 feet.
Well, that would have killed you.
Well, it didn't.
Something that big would have thrown that at you. You would have thought that it would have done tremendous amount of more damage.
That's why I thought maybe it dropped it.
Glancing blow. What's that?
That's why I thought maybe it dropped it.
I mean, it could have been standing there, standing over me for all I know. And
yeah, it could have had the can above its head, maybe looking at it or whatever, and it slipped out of its hand.
Yeah, I have no idea how it transpired, but all I know is I had to go to work with a huge knot on my head with a cut on my forehead and try to explain people, and I was like pulling my bangs down so that people were asking me, what in the heck happened to you?
I think what it was looking for was, here's the beans, now where's the cornbread?
Yep. I've always said that.
But, you know, I have wondered many a time how I managed to live through the episode, you know. And
it goes to their
intentions.
intentions.
It was right. The can of beans was, I mean, when I raised up, it was somewhere on the pillow above me, and it literally rolled down and hit me on the side of the hip there. And I was kind of like, I looked at it like, you know, and my first thought was, what the hell is this doing over here? And I just sat it over on the nightstand and didn't really, I don't know. I wasn't thinking too clearly at that point in time. I'll be honest with you.
You know, it could be the juveniles. You know, they don't know what they're doing a whole lot of times either.
Where was the can dented? Was it dented on the rim?
No, the can wasn't dented at all.
Oh.
No, the can wasn't dented at all. The can was perfectly intact. It was the only thing dented was my forehead. I still kind of got a little L-shaped scar up there on my forehead where the edge of the can caught me and cut my forehead. And of course, you know, it's so easy that the skin is so thin up there anyway, and it bleeds profusely. And that's what first made me put my hand to my head. Not only the fact that my head was hurting, but you know, when I sat up, that blood started running down my face, and I felt that, and I put my hand up there, and I was like, "Oh my God, where did this come from?"
I wonder what went through its. I wonder what went through its mind when it saw the can hit you and you didn't wake up.
Time for me to leave.
Yeah, right. Exit stage right.
Well, there couldn't have been very much time elapsed between the time that it hit you and the time that you woke up, because the blood was not coagulated. It was still bleeding.
Yes, you're exactly correct, and I thought about that too. In fact, that the smell was so strong in the cabin still. So that's why I'll be honest with you. I think I realized at that point that something or somebody had just been in there, and it didn't smell human. It didn't smell like, you know, human body odor. And I was literally piling. I pushed furniture up against the door is what I did. And I you know, I don't. Of course, knowing now probably what was in there, and that the furniture would have done no good. But I think it was a juvenile that came in there, because I don't think that big guy could have got through the door. Seriously.
Hey, Tom, you know, that makes me think about TW's story with his friend John, you know, the guy that got his finger bit off. Now, there was quite a fight going on in that room. I wonder, I'm just, you know, spitballing. I wonder if there was a strong, maybe urine smell in there, too, because the creature was there for a bit of time.
Well, no, he said there was. Remember, when he went back there, he said it smelled, it was horrible.
Okay,
it was
I
awful.
didn't remember that, but yeah.
Yeah, he did. I remember that vividly.
And it's not that different from Carol's, you know, where the creatures were actually marking her car by peeing on the hood and the door handle.
Right?
Interesting.
Oh, that's just disgusting.
Well, it is disgusting, isn't it?
Disgusting. Yes.
You know, I've heard accounts of them coming into a house, and I mean, and we've experienced in the log cabin down in southeastern Oklahoma where they'll come up to the door and jingle the door handle trying to get into the house. And, you know, I've heard stories like that. So it's not.
Oh, yeah.
It's
no, that's not uncommon, Chuck.
Right.
I was going over some of my old journal notes last night, and I was looking at that, and I was like, oh yeah, can you imagine?
You know,
that thing jiggling your doorknob, you take a look at, oh, it's him. Huh.
I wonder how often too they would mark something by peeing on it. I mean, that's not something I have really tracked, you know, with talking to people, but I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Well, it might be like a dog that always goes and makes the rounds, and they always pee on the same tree. Or, you know, this is my territory. So I would imagine that they might do the same thing.
Might be in a place, let's say, where there aren't trees where they can, you know, break them like they would say out here. Maybe that's something they would do in a place where there isn't that kind of vegetation to do that kind of marking with.
Well, I think I told you this story about going down to Brown Springs, which is on the Texas-Oklahoma border, and just for giggles and see if I could get a response, I'd get up in the middle of the night and pee on this one certain tree that was not very far from my tent. And the next morning when we got up and we went to eat breakfast, and then we came back to camp. And when we got back to camp, that tree that I had been marking was pushed over, and if it would have been probably 6 or 7 more inches closer to my tent, it would have smashed my tent.
Well, Tom, you remember, we shouldn't mention our friend, but who's involved in that stuff, said that they, when they're out on their missions, they don't pee on the ground. They'll do it in bottles or whatever and take it with them, because that apparently upsets the creatures significantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
well, how many
that was
times,
Go ahead, Tony.
How many times have you heard the incidents where someone has gone out beyond the camp to urinate, and then to be confronted by a creature?
Mm-hmm.
It's commonplace.
Yep.
And I don't know if it is an attractant or if it is something that is an irritant.
I would think it's a slight, wouldn't you,
angered.
Forrest?
What's that?
I'm sorry. I didn't hear what
Wouldn't
you
you think
said,
that's
Phil.
a slight? I mean, if you were going out in their area and urinating,
Yeah.
I mean, you're telling them this is my territory, and I think they'd be a little offended at that.
Yeah, male chimps would take offense to that. Yeah, male primates take offense to that. So, I think they would react in the same manner.
That goes to reason why that tree was. I mean, and it was a green tree. I mean, the leaves were green and everything else, and it just about probably 4 inches off the ground, that sucker was broke and shoved over toward my tent.
Yeah, that's a pretty clear response, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chuck, you were just pushing the limits there.
Yes, I was. I'm kind of like that.
Well, I don't want them coming in my house anymore. They're not invited. I'm sorry. I'm going to put out no Bigfoot invited sign.
Quit eating beans.
Yeah. Here, I'll leave the beans outside. You can figure out how to open them yourself.
Make sure you have the cornbread.
They make the pop top. They make the pop top, now. So the particular can I had at that point in time didn't have the pop top, but I've noticed that they've gone to making pop top songs.
See,
so maybe they could figure that out.
That's why you got smacked. They said you got to get the right can out here.
Really?
Sure.
Am I going to have to go to Walmart to get my beans? They just won't let me in the store. Not properly attired.
And that's not the first time you hear about stuff like that. I mean, I interviewed a guy many years ago. He was a Vietnam vet, and, he didn't talk to a lot of people. He was kind of to himself, but he found out I was a veteran. So we got talking, and he got telling me about a hunting trip that him and some buddies went on up by Mount St. Helens. And this is something I know, Chuck, I'm sure you've heard of this many times, and where they'll get into somebody's cooler. And they had one of these big ones, these big coolers. And when they came back from their hunting that morning, they didn't just get into the cooler. They dumped the thing all over the ground and took, some of the meat and some other things that were in there.
I actually had something like that happen. Went on an expedition, and I had brought a cooler that was full of granola bars and snacks and stuff. And when I set it over by the picnic table was concrete, and I just shoved my cooler on underneath one of the seats there, and so it was pretty snug. Well, next morning I went out there, and the cooler had been pulled out, and the granola bars and all that stuff, there was a trail going out into the woods of empty wrappers. And somebody said, well, coons did that. And I'm like, coons don't go all the way down a trail with empty granola, packages laying
exactly
every 5 or 6 feet.
And
they're going to shred them.
That's Tom. Remember we interviewed Jerry Klein, the guy had the trailer. The two creatures tried pushing over, and they called the police and everything. That was one of the things that led up to that event. Was he had you remember he had the container outside of his travel trailer, and he put the it was recycling. He had plastic bottles and things in there. So he went out one day and he found this trail of this material going out towards the creek, and he actually encountered one of the creatures out there at the end of this trail of objects.
Well, and remember the gal that you and I spoke with? We can't mention her in what capacity or anything. It was about probably less than a month ago. And she's got these things, it looks like they're rummaging around her farm. This is here in Oregon, and going through the garbage.
Oh, yeah. I think they actually emptied that big dumpster.
Yeah, absolutely. As well as some of the livestock just vanishing. So.
Well, what about you talking about the recycling? What? Remember my recycling?
Yeah,
I do.
You've had the same thing happen.
Oh my God! I mean, they lined everything up, and I walk out and I'm like, "What the heck's going on here?"
See, that's what happened with Jerry too. It wasn't they just were dropping things; they were actually lining them up, almost like a trail out to the creek, leading him there. And we've heard that kind of stuff before. It's you'll find those historical precedents out there.
I couldn't believe I walked out and I just looked at that and I'm like, okay, well, raccoons didn't do this and the cats didn't do this.
Exactly. Those animals make a big mess with things.
Oh yeah, they just rip open the bag. Well, see, it was, I think if you remember, I told you that was the bag that I was actually filling stuff up in, and I tie it at the top, but I don't tie it in a knot so that it can't be open. And it had been opened at the top, and then all these things were set out, different sizes, and lined up in a perfect line. But there wasn't any, it didn't go down incrementally, large to small or anything like that. It was just like they just pulled out various things and, I like this and I like that, and then just lined it up.
Here's something.
It's almost like something it's almost like something you see a toddler do.
Right. Here's something for a thought. We've got a couple different kinds of situations. Ones where they're removing wrappers and throwing the paper on the ground. And then, like I found, the scat with the cellophane bag in it. So you have the neat Sasquatch on one side, then you have the Animal House Sasquatch on the other side. Or, where they just stuff, stuff wrapper and
Oscar
everything
Madison.
in
the mouth. For those of us who can remember, Oscar Madison, I don't remember who the other guy was, but remember that TV show?
Oh, yeah, The Odd Couple.
Oh, yeah.
The Odd Couple.
Oh, yeah, The Odd Couple.
Yeah.
So when we're running short on time, folks, we're going to wrap up pretty soon. But it's something food for thought. If you can figure out which type of creature you got, whether they're being neat and discarding the wrappers or they're eating it.
Do their proper recycling.
Well, it's a different kind of recycling for sure.
Well, this is true.
Whether you're just throwing trash on the ground or you're composting. Well,
Oh God.
we're out of time, folks. So any final thoughts, everybody? Let's go around the fire and kind of put our last 2 cents in.
I'll start. I'm going to say thank you, Tony, for joining us. I hope we get many more campfire stories with you. And this is a lot of fun. It's just very informal, no specific agenda. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank Tony and
Thank you.
Will and yeah, absolutely, Forrest and Chuck, all of us. So thanks, guys.
Chuck?
Yeah, I enjoyed Tony's stories. And it was funny. Can I tell him this, Tom? He gave me a little bit heads up on one of your stories, and my first comment was, I'd have been under the truck, and I thought that was funny when you said that they crawled under the truck, because you know what? That had been where I was, too, under the truck.
Right?
Chuck, how about you?
Really good question. Fire camp. Very, very good conversation. I enjoyed it.
Tony, we definitely appreciate you coming on and being back with us, and you're welcome here anytime. So you have any final thoughts or comments?
One of the things that always fascinates me, and the more I hear, the more I start leaning in that direction, and that is the divergence of intelligence that these creatures display. Some will line up bottles or whatever it is all the way down to a creek or some location, and somebody else will eat it.
Yeah, right.
One of the creatures will do one thing, and then the other will do something else that leads you to believe and guides you to the intellectual quotient that they have. Some of these
Look at
things
humans.
well, that's exactly where you're headed. That's exactly right. Look at the people. It's the same thing. And if you add the gentleman who will remain unnamed and the Sierra Sounds, you start talking about our language. Do they have a language? How do they communicate? It's amazing topic.
Or
just
amazing. Or you get
amazing.
like the two juveniles where the other one smacked the other one with a stick in the head.
That's got to be one of my favorites.
Okay, so with that, folks, we're going to wrap here. Thanks for sitting in with us. Join us next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.